Hey everyone, welcome to Spanish with Esteban. In this new series, we're going to be talking about Spanish, common Spanish questions, but digging deep into its history and culture. Today I want to talk about the use of formal language and informal language. If you enjoy nerding out about linguistics and culture, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We are going to start with a basic explanation of when you're going to use tú and when to use usted. Then we're going to see a brief overview of vos. And then finally, we're going to dig deep into the history and culture of the use of formal and informal language in Spanish. Tú versus usted. A lot of English speakers struggle a little bit with the idea of using, oh, there's a formal pronoun, there's an informal pronoun. It's not that complicated because you know when to be formal and informal. How are you behaving in a job interview? How do you behave with the father of your girlfriend? I don't know, maybe that's not exactly the same case because it would depend. But you know circumstances where you need to be formal and when you need to be informal. Use those same ideas and just change the pronoun to tú and usted in Spanish. As a general rule, you're going to be using tú if you're talking to your friends, if you're talking to family members, if you're talking to children or classmates or colleagues you like, or pets or animals. Unless, of course, it's a capybara wearing a top hat and a monocle, which in that case, you do need to use the formal language. It's a rule. And you're going to use usted when you're talking to older people, people in positions of authority, professionals like doctors or teachers, people you don't know well, or informal business situations like if you're with your boss or you're in a job interview. All right, let's practice. Let's set an example. Let's say you were growing up in the 90s and you want to call your crush through a regular phone, and after a couple of rings, their stern dad answers the phone and says, "Who is this?" Would you use formal or would you use informal language? You would probably use formal, but if you're like me, the correct answer would be neither. You would immediately hang up and give up completely on your love life. Just cry until you're 21. Using vos. This poor pronoun, I don't know what it did, but it's usually forgotten from textbooks. Why? I don't know. What's wrong with vos? Put it on the textbook. The use of vos changes depending on the region, but it's generally an informal way to address someone, sometimes reserved for people you have a lot of familiarity with. Here are the countries where vos is predominant: Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, El Salvador. And here are the countries where both vos and tú are used: Bolivia, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, and many others. So that's a quick overview of the use of tú, usted, and vos. The use of these pronouns depends a lot on the region, on the social context, on family relationships, or even on personal preferences. So what would happen if you use the wrong pronoun to address someone? You'll get arrested immediately. Just kidding, you shouldn't worry too much about it. Just use your common sense. If you want to be cautious, you can also use the formal option, usted. You can also ask, ¿puedo tutearle? Which means, can I address you informally? You're basically asking, can I you? Let's talk about different places where vos, tú, and usted are used. The most predominant form in Argentina and Uruguay is vos, regardless of age or social status or context. You will rarely hear tú here, except like in some places in the north of the country. Usted can be used formally, but you won't encounter it that much. The voceo in Argentina is unique. It affects most verb conjugations, and it's like a very important part of the identity, the linguistic identity of all of the southern cone of South America. Not as universal as Argentina, but Chile uses vos extensively. However, the verb conjugation is unique as the verb ending is similar to the vosotros form, but without the S sound. So for example, they would say vos coméis instead of vos comés. This gives Chileans a unique melodic rhythm to their informal conversations. The use of usted in some regions of Colombia is very different from any other country. We talked to our friend David about it.
How we use tú and usted in Colombia? That's a very interesting question. It's mainly a regional difference. Usted is more used in the region where my parents come from, which is in the Middle West side region of Colombia, where the best Colombian coffee comes from. It's very widespread. People always use usted over tú.
So I've understood that in some regions of Colombia, you use usted as a normal form of conversation, but the tú sometimes may feel a little bit more intimate, or like it seems like you would be flirting with someone, right? Are there any considerations about the use of tú and usted with gender? Like how men address women when they're interested, or how men address each other?
This is more related to gender and how gender is perceived in society. So there is a case, for example, where it is not common for men to use tú to address other men in Bogota. That's changing as well. But there is also kind of gender relationship to the region as well. So men don't feel comfortable addressing other men with tú.
Tú and usted in history. The history of tú and usted is actually the history of the pronoun vos. The use of formal and informal actually comes from Latin, which distinguished between tú, the singular you, and vos, the plural you. It was like you and them. Around like 300 AD, the Roman Empire was divided, and there were suddenly two emperors, so the plural you became formal. This formal address stuck because it made sense, like a single person in a position of power speaks not only for themselves, but also for the people below them. Kind of similar to what happened with the royal we in English. We will take 2 pieces of cake, please. So vos was originally used as the polite you in Latin when the Romans conquered what is now Spain. Vos became so prevalent as a singular you that in order to use a plural form, people started saying vos otros, vosotros as in vos, and otros meaning literally you and others. Hundreds of years later, when Spanish was finally taking shape, that vos transformed into vuestra merced, meaning your grace or your mercy. And people used it to speak to nobility or people of high importance. Over time, vuestra merced changed to vuesa merced, vuesar sed, vusar sed, vusted, which is why sometimes you'll see the abbreviation of usted as a VD, usted. Usted eventually replaced vos, which slowly became antiquated. However, that change happened slower in the region of Andalusia. Most of the Spaniards that originally came to the Americas were from that area, specifically from Seville, and they brought with them the use of vos, along with other language quirks, like not using the vosotros form, for example. Think about it, isn't that fascinating? This one city in Spain, with all their quirky accents and their colloquial norms and the weird way of talking, separated from Madrid and their linguistic authority, and they were the ones that determined how an entire continent spoke the language. It's like if a new continent with millions of people from different regions and landscapes was suddenly taken over by a handful of New Yorkers. Like, what? We would all have our different versions of how to say, hey, I'm walking here. Hey, I'm walking here. Or whatever, I'm bad at accents. The use of vos started to slowly disappear in Spain, and colonial capitals and important cities in the Americas started to get rid of the vos because of the contact with Spain. But regions that were hard to reach kept using vos. So, here's a map of the major cities of the Spanish colonies. And here's a map of the regions that use vos. From plural pronoun to formal singular to plural again as vosotros to informal singular, vos has had quite a journey. Like, it's gone everywhere. The use of tú, usted, and vos in the Americas took different forms depending on the region, but having formal and informal ways to address others was certainly convenient in a colonial society that was marked by social classes. Spain strongly implemented a hierarchical structure in its colonies, creating social separations of class and race. So the use of formal and informal language really helped to reinforce these structures, and the use of tú and usted continues to be a reflection of class to this day. But the use of tú and usted has also allowed Spanish speakers to create layers of familiarity in their daily interactions. We've seen that they're used differently in different places, but the reverence and appreciation for our elders, the affection between friends, or the intimacy between lovers It's all put into contrast by our use of tú and usted, the formal and the informal. Finally, let me close this by talking a little bit about my personal experience and how I have used tú and usted. In my country, it's not a norm to use it this way, but I grew up addressing my parents and my older sister using usted, even though we had a very casual relationship. My younger brother, for example, he was a tú always, but I addressed my grandparents as usted. Sometimes it's customary in Ecuador to use usted in certain intimate situations, like when talking to a serious girlfriend. Those couples that were like really cheesy with each other use it. And I'm ashamed to say that once upon a time I did it too. I usually address people informally because that's just my personality. I don't think anyone has been offended by it. Although, in general, I prefer to avoid formal situations. I just don't like ties. If using tú and usted still seems confusing to you, don't worry too much about it. This is not an experience that is unique to you. We as native speakers also have to navigate these questions as we interact with people. Here's David again talking about adapting the use of tú and usted in his own country.
I was always used to use usted with my family and with my mates at school. But when I went to college, everyone was coming from different regions in Bogota, and they made me learn how to use tú because they were feeling always very uncomfortable with me using usted with them.
So you see, we also have experiences where we go to different places, we meet different people, and we need to adapt to our own language. If you want to know more about Spanish, be sure to subscribe and follow. If you're a Spanish speaker, how do you use tú and usted? Let us know in the comments. See you next time! And that's an informal you, by the way.